This is FYI on your TV, brought to you by Hometown News. I'm Kathy Botham. I have got Marty Ennis with me. You have a family business, a maple syrup business on Bennett Lake. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Kathy.
Today we're taping on March 1st, which is Pancake Tuesday, one of the days we celebrate maple syrup, so it's extra special that you join us today.
Yeah.
Now let's talk about your maple syrup production. It's a tradition. It's been going on for quite some time now.
Yeah, we are, my grandfather and his father started making maple syrup on the farm post World War II when he came back from England. And, for maple syrup production, the really neat thing about it is the first agricultural crop of the year. It sort of signals the end of winter and the start of the next growing season. And for a lot of farmers historically, it was their first source of income, since the fall when the harvest season would have been in October. So it was a great way to get out and make a little bit of pocket money and start the year off. So I am the fourth generation of maple syrup producer on our family's property. My kids are the fifth.
I love the way we're talking tradition too, because there's the old-fashioned way of collecting it, where it was the taps in the trees and the buckets, and you've got the lines in now.
We do, yeah. I think my grandfather, if I remember right, because I wasn't very old, was up to about 1,100 taps on buckets when I was probably in the late 70s. There's pictures of me as a kid carrying a 5-gallon bucket where I think more sap went into my rubber boots than it actually made it back to the wagon. But somewhere around the late 70s, a lot of producers started to look at less labor-intensive ways to collect the sap. So tubing was strung tree to tree to tree, and then goes to a central tank where you then collect it from there. The technology has changed a lot over the last number of years, where my grandfather would have thought that what was a good season for my grandfather is probably now about a quarter of what we were able to make with the new technology we have.
Wow, and I mean, speaking of technology too, you still do it the old-fashioned way, and it's wood fire.
We wood fire, yeah. It's a high efficiency wood fire, so that it doesn't use nearly as much wood. And what most producers do now of any size is use reverse osmosis to cut down on your carbon footprint as well. So RO is normally used to actually make clean water. In the maple industry, we use it the other way. We use RO to get rid of the water so that we don't have to boil as much, which means we have to use less fuel and less time.
Wow. Now I was looking at your website last night too. You've got is it 4,600 taps?
Yeah, we're about 45, 4,600 taps. It comes and goes, depending on, as trees get sort of to the end of their useful life, they either fall down or need to be culled because they are diseased or damaged. And, that's one of the reasons why we decided to stay wood fired, is we have this source of natural local fuel that gets put to one last use. That tree that my grandfather and my great grandfather would have tapped, will continue to make syrup for me one more year.
They're still part of it all. That's for sure. That's for sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
4,600 taps. So I believe your website too said that's 30 kilometers of tubing.
We have it's north of 100,000 feet of tubing that we have out in the woods that it stays up year round. And so that it gets stretched. It has a lifespan of about 10 years, and then it sort of gets replaced on a rotating basis. So that allows us to keep a tight system. We used to take all that tubing down and put it back up every spring.
Wow.
My March break every year when I was a kid was take all the rolls of tubing that were stored in the sugar camp, carry them back out to the head tree, and then stretch them for a week to get all the lines back up. But the new tubing is UV stable, and it doesn't thermally expand or contract very much, so it allows us to keep it up year round. There's deer damage, and the coyotes and the bears will gnaw on it a little bit, so there's always repairs that have to be done, but it's a lot less effort.
I think that's the biggest thing people talk about with the maintenance of it all, and they call it the critters. But yeah, deers and coyotes too, yeah, and squirrels and raccoons get at it.
Yeah, yeah, a little bit. More often than not, it's out of curiosity. The old tubing that we used to use, and the people used to use a very diluted bleach solution to try to clean their tubing. And the problem with bleach is it left a salt residue, and then as soon as the squirrels figured out that it was salty, there would be chews all over the place. There's still the odd squirrel that thinks that the fittings that we have on the end of our pipeline are some sort of nut, and we'll chew off all the fittings in a certain area around the woods and then go stash them away somewhere. They'll be sadly mistaken when they go to try to eat them in the middle of the winter that there's not much there for them.
So now you've got all these lines up, and it gets back to the farm. So how much syrup are you able to make? How much sap do you get? What does it look like at the farm?
So we have four different sections of woods that just the topography of being north of seven. My ancestors didn't get the good farmland. We got the swamps and the hills instead of the good cropland, but it means that it's good for growing maple trees. So the topography means that we've got sap gets collected in four different locations. The largest section of woods being about 2,000 taps, and it's almost a mile from our sugar camp. So it gets pumped from one tank to another tank, and then that tank pumps it back to the sugar camp. So where it used to be that we had to go and gather it with a wagon and a large tank on the wagon, we're now able to drive out in the ATV, flip a switch, it pumps the tank dry, and shows up in the sugar camp almost a mile away. So a lot less effort, a lot less carbon footprint as well, as far as the energy that we consume to do it. And then so that gets pumped back to a 3,000 gallon tank in our sugar camp. That 3,000 gallon tank of raw sap feeds our reverse osmosis machine, which our RO machine is able to get rid of almost 90% of the water, depending on how hard we dial up the pressure in the membrane. Wow. And so instead of it being 2% sap as raw sap coming in, meaning it's about a 40 to 45 to 1 ratio of sap to syrup, we're able to get it down to about 18% sugar before it goes into the evaporator, which means that instead of me having to boil off 40 plus gallons of water, I only have to boil off about 4 gallons of water to make a gallon of syrup.
Wow. Wow. That's amazing in itself. I've never heard of that part of it before. Wow.
Yeah, it's a huge energy in labor savings. We like to tell the stories of the nights where we took shifts sleeping in the truck, where we had such a rush of syrup or sap coming in that we had to boil night and day. Not good for the evaporator, not good for the equipment to run that long. So it allows us to manage our day jobs and to make, frankly, it actually makes a better quality product because it's more consistent, and you're not running the evaporator for as many hours.
Wow, wow. Now, the production system you've got there too. I know some people welcome the public to come and see it. I know we've been going through COVID. What does that look like?
We are not set up with our business for receiving the public. Family and friends, of course. It is a gathering place in the spring where it's about the only time I get to see my family, my extended family in the spring is they show up in the sugar camp, and they pretty quickly get put to work, bottling or labeling containers. And there are lots of maple producers in the area that do welcome the public. Wheelers, Temples, Fultons, and the like are set up for receiving guests. The pancake houses and trails and those types of activities, which is a great way to get your family out of the house and get out in the snowshoes and see how it's done.
Oh, that's wonderful. That's wonderful. Now, you were saying that the trees that die off and they're old, you use them for the wood fire. Do you do a lot of planting as well for new trees?
We don't need to. Our wood sort of naturally repopulates. As the interesting thing with the ecosystem of the trees is that as one tree dies, it allows more sunlight to the forest floor, and now that large tree is no longer taking up all the nutrients, and you'll quickly see a big pocket of young seedlings come up the following spring, and we will manage that as that sort of floor of seedlings grows. We'll trim them down and we'll reduce the competition and we'll allow them to grow. My father, about 20 years ago, did replant some trees that he had dug up from along a field edge, and those are getting close. Probably within the next decade, we might be able to tap some of them. I know some like Jamie Fortune from Fortune Farms. He has just recently actually started to tap a couple of acres of field that he had planted almost 25 years ago. I think it was about the ice storm when they planted that field. And so, it's a long game. The trees that we tap are a minimum of 40 years old. Some of them longer, depending on how big sorry, how much competition they have and how tight the forest is. And some of our oldest trees, we have some trees that I call a 3-man tree. It takes 3 men to get their arms around it, and those trees are probably 200 years old.
Wow. Wow. This is amazing because this isn't your main business. This is a hobby. It's a family hobby together. So it's an awful lot to know and an awful lot to have to do. It's a commitment for sure.
It is, and I love though that you think of all the things, all the food that you have in your fridge, or in your kitchen. Not many of those are you actually connected with the person who makes it. So it's bought at the grocery store. You might maybe have heard of the producer, but if it's coming from a large food packer, it's somewhat faceless. Versus our bottle of syrup that sits in your fridge with my name on it. That means that a little bit of my blood, sweat, and tears has gone into helping to feed your family, and it's a commitment that we make, and we do it because we love it. Wouldn't want to know what I make by the hour if we ever figured out the actual return on investment, but it's a passion. It's something that it helps to sort of define who I am.
Well, absolutely. I mean, it started when you were a little boy collecting sap and getting more in your boots than in the buckets.
Yeah.
That's right, and you're carrying it on.
Milk bags tied around your feet to try to keep your feet dry, which just meant your feet got even wetter.
Yeah, that's right. They were just slipperier, I swear, yes. Well, this is great. This is great. Today we are talking to you on March 1st, so it's Pancake Tuesday, and we have Maple Weekend coming up April 2nd and 3rd, and Maple Fest is coming up this year, so hopefully we'll be able to do it in person.
Fingers crossed. Yeah, April 30th, last Saturday in April is Festival of Maples. We've been there right since the very start. I think the only year we were not there was 1998, the year of the ice storm. We had so much damage that we were not able to make any syrup that year. But we will be there along with a lot of other local producers, and it's a great opportunity to get the family out. I love seeing the crowds of 20,000 people in downtown Perth when we have a nice sunny day in April, and get a chance to get your sweet fix for the summer.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, that's it. We have a little bit of snow left to have some taffy on the snow. That's what my favorite is. So.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for joining us. Thank you for making this work. Thank you for keeping the tradition up. Your grandfather, your father would be very proud, for sure.
Thank you, Kathy.
And Marty Ennis you are from Ennis Maple Products on Bennett Lake. Thanks for joining us today.